welcome to the African Echo podcast. I am joined by Dr. Ntlotleng Mabena. I do hope that I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Dr. Mabena. Dr. Mabena is a medical doctor. She is a researcher and a health specialist, but she works very closely and look deeply into trauma-informed healing, gender-based violence, and inclusive health for the marginalized group. Let me welcome Dr. Mabena. Thank you so much for your time and also having this space to just converse on this very important conversation and topic.
Thank you very much, Portia. First of all, yes, you said my name correctly, so and I'm very happy about that. And I'm really feeling very honored to be part of this conversation, especially since we are marking the month where we are focusing a lot on issues of mental health, which we know are hugely stigmatized, professionally, socially, and as you said in your intro, every family is affected by a mental health issue, one way or another, and trauma and all of that. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Mabena, I'm meeting with you. It's difficult at times where as a person, as a human being, trauma is informed by many forms. But because you're here, please provide with us what does trauma mean when we talk about trauma and what impacts does it have on mental health?
That is a great question to kick off because I think we use the word trauma so much and
Yeah.
it loses meaning or people even don't really understand what that word actually means. So when we look at trauma, when we say somebody has experienced trauma is when a distressing event, incident, or anything happens to somebody and then it has psychological, emotional, or even sometimes physical manifestations
Right.
of receiving that traumatic or distressing event that they have experienced. Now, when we talk about trauma, a distressing event, let me put it that way. Usually, like you said, we usually think of big things like violence, like gender-based violence and rape and murder and stabbing and shooting. We think of these major life events as traumatic events, which obviously they are. But we actually, as human beings, we are affected by trauma every single day and every single interaction that we have with the world. Some of us are in circumstances where you are unemployed, right? Um, and it's a distressing factor because it affects you emotionally, psychologically, and all of that because you are supposed to be providing economically, maybe for your family, for your loved ones. You're supposed to be putting food on the table. You're supposed to be paying school fees, things like that. The words that we speak to each other as colleagues, as friends, as neighbors, sometimes are so harsh,
Mm,
so harsh.
mm,
And the words that we speak to each other cause each other trauma.
mm,
They are distressing events that cause psychological impact, emotional impact, and sometimes physical impact. So there's a whole lot of things that we can point towards as things that cause trauma, and not only just the big things. And it's very important, I think, actually, to highlight the importance of the smaller everyday events that also are traumatic to us, but we don't respond to them. We don't treat them as trauma because they are not bleeding, they are not needing an emergency
mm,
medical care, or they are not needing the police and things like that. So it's very important to realize that all of these micro stressors, you can even call them, of life, of everyday life,
mm.
all of them, they add to this
Yeah.
trauma that a person can feel. And of course, that will have impacting psychological and emotional consequences,
Okay.
which is which is what it is now when we are talking about mental illness. Now we are going into mental condition and mental illness. When
Yes.
we talk about a mental condition, we're meaning it's a condition, a disease, an illness of some sort that affects a person's emotions, a person's thinking, a person's behavior in such a way that it actually hinders on their daily functioning.
Mm.
So if you hear that definition that I just gave you, you can see that we're probably all suffering from a mental condition
True.
at
Yeah.
one point or
Or
another.
another. Yeah.
And in fact, the statistics, as we were saying, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. The statistics say in South Africa, every fourth adult, and these are even I'll call them very conservative statistics.
Mm.
Every fourth adult has or is suffering from depression, and every fifth adult is suffering from anxiety and
Mm.
panic attacks and all of those things. That's a lot of us.
Mm.
That is a lot, a big number. So just think of your nuclear family, a family of two parents and two kids. One of that first family
It's right.
is suffering from a mental condition. And obviously, it will affect the rest of the family system, right? Because if this person has particular needs and is not able to function, to work, to be productive, to do all of these things, to have motivation, it means everybody else around that person have to adjust their ways to be able to support this person.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
This is what we mean when we start bringing the language of trauma-informed supporting
Right.
each other.
Mm.
Because when we say you are supporting a family member or a patient or anybody in a trauma-informed way, you are saying, I am being considerate of the fact that whatever stressors that this person has gone through have affected them so heavily that they are affecting their judgment, they're affecting their emotions, they're affecting everything. So I have to be considerate
Mm.
in how I'm approaching you, helping you, supporting you, so that I don't re traumatize you. I don't become another trigger, another stressor that traumatizes you even further.
Hmm. No, this is very, very vastly important in the definition. Definitely, it covers all the types, and the description is very descriptive, Dr. Mabena. You work mainly with trauma-based issues, and what are some of the common overlooked mental health effects following disasters? I'll make typical examples. In Hammaskral, people there, the communities have suffered long term in terms of water. Availability and whatnot, especially you will not understand. Those are areas where people have been complaining more about the undrinkable water. How do you survive without the source like that? Here in Durban, we were hardly hit by the disasters of floods back in 2022. Just recently, Eastern Cape had also. So these kind of things, how common is these, especially to go beyond just the common PTSDs that you normally talk about, but to focus on these ones, Dr. Mabene, because yeah, I will tell you from my own experience, I experienced it harshly. Whenever I would see water, I will just freeze. Whenever it's raining, you just feel like, what's next? So
Yeah.
take us through, how do you survive these?
As you are relating to all of the examples that you've just related, it takes me back to the one extreme case, right? And now it's showing you that if we do not deal with trauma and the effects of trauma, what the actual consequences can be. It reminds me of the case of the recent floods that you were mentioning in Umtata,
Mm.
where I think, I can't remember the details very well, but I think it was a 17-year-old girl who
Mm.
had lost everything,
Sure.
everything. Her mother and I think her brother or something like that. And months later, she then died by suicide.
Mm.
This shows us all the importance of continuous support
Mm.
to each other, not only to people who've only experienced extreme types of trauma,
Mm.
like these disasters that you are mentioning.
Yeah.
But I think if we as human beings practice to treat and deal with each other every day in a trauma-informed way,
Right.
It does provide some form of cushion when disasters happen,
Mm,
because now we are at least a little bit practiced in being human with each other
mm,
and providing that 17-year-old girl with the proper psychosocial support that
mm,
she needed, and not just being moved to a place of safety, a shelter or something, because she no longer has a physical space to live in. But what about the internal wounds
mm.
that are eating her up every single
Every
day?
single day. Yeah.
How are we helping? How are we creating space for each other to openly talk about these wounds that sit inside of us? You know that when you talk about the KZN disasters that happened, the traumatic disaster, to this day, and like you just mentioned, to this day, my friends in KZN will say, as soon as you see clouds gather,
Mm,
when you see clouds gather and rain comes down, it just re-triggers everything completely, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if what previously happened is going to happen again. And everybody goes into a panic and everybody goes into a spin, and we forget to reach out to
mm,
each other.
mm,
We are too stuck in my own panic and my own frenzy. But if I actually opened myself up to have a conversation with Portia, to realize that Portia is going through the very same emotions that I'm going through,
mm,
maybe Portia and me can get to a calm point where Portia and me can come up with a plan that will help us should the storm actually come down.
mm.
So undealt trauma, what it does to all of us, it paralyzes us,
Right.
completely paralyzes us, because any trigger, like the people in the Umtata area, there were some survivors that we got to speak to. They were saying that just hearing a sound of a helicopter hovering around
Mm,
brings back all those flashes
mm.
completely. And you were talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's
Yeah.
exactly that. It's trauma. And trauma, the body remembers. There's this saying that we always, the body remember. Even if your mind can try and forget and whatever, we store all the trauma, all the pain, everything in the body.
Mm,
So when a trigger comes and whatever, your body is going to react because that trauma has not been dealt with.
mm.
And we can deal with trauma by opening up more spaces to talk.
Yeah.
When we talk about therapy, it doesn't only mean a psychologist, a social worker, a doctor. It literally means opening up spaces for us to talk
Mm,
with no judgment.
mm, mm. And
That's how we heal.
it scares me a bit, Dr. Mabena, because when I'll make a typical example. Males, men do not like talking. Talking things, no, no. They deal with things in their own way, and you find them in situations that you can tell there was something that was not dealt here. Hence, we are moving towards this way. You can tell the traumas that the person is still they're still carrying throughout their livelihood. So it's easier maybe for us as women because I'll tell you, ukuthi, I'm still am scared and I'm still am dealing with this. But for a man,
Mm.
they'll act up like everything is okay. Then
Yeah.
what happens there?
And I mean, there are some initiatives that, are available out there where there are men, incredible men, who are working on programs with other men. Because to be honest, men feel comfortable
With other
mostly
men.
speaking to other men.
Yeah,
So
true.
it doesn't mean that they don't speak, they just don't speak to us. So there's also a lot of value in making sure that in those spaces where men are working with men, um, be it through circumcision programs, initiation programs, whatever it is,
Mm,
we also introduce this trauma-informed way of working with men,
okay.
so that men can also start having spaces where they themselves can also speak honestly, openly, unashamedly about the trauma that sits in their bodies. and normalize it amongst men so that they
Yeah.
can continue to do it every day
Mm,
for themselves, with themselves.
mm,
Once they start becoming comfortable in opening up and having those kind of spaces to talk by themselves,
mm,
I'm sure at some point we will be able to bridge the gaps
mm.
of the communication between masculinity and femininity. I think also there's a break in the way that we communicate because we just don't give each other enough space to communicate in the best way that we know how to communicate. We have expectations, you know. We expect them to tell us things in this way, and then they expect us to. The expectations are what mess us up at the end of the day. And interestingly enough, one of my colleagues was looking at this very topic of men who were affected by the floods in Umtata
Right.
and their mental health inputs or consequences thereof. And there was actually, I think they did a show on one of the radio stations in Umtata where a lot of men actually called in and
Mm,
were talking about the effect of trauma, the
mm,
effect of trauma, and not just only that incident of the floods, but the effect of trauma and how it sits inside of them that makes it also even harder for them to talk and vent out what their issues are about the effects of the floods on them and their ability to provide for their families in terms of economically and in terms of shelter, because
mm,
now they have been washed away. So
mm.
it is an interesting topic and it's a deep topic. It's a This whole topic that we are talking about actually
It's
has many layers to it.
it's
Um,
absolutely is.
we
It's
haven't even
absolutely.
begun to talk about the children who are the survivors too, who also lost families and
Mm,
have been taken to places of safety and things like that. But are we making enough effort in the therapeutic interventions
mm,
when we respond to trauma?
mm,
When we respond, especially to disasters? I don't think so. I
mm,
think we focus a lot on the physical things, the shelter, the food,
mm,
which is of course important, but then we leave out the intangible things, which are the actual things that eat people up from inside outwards.
mm.
So we need more space
More
for
space.
therapeutic interventions.
Hey, yeah, it will take years and years, I believe, Dr. Mabena, because ikapetala ngaphandle. It's a struggle.
Okay.
It's a struggle. Now, in South Africa, it has shown ukuthi in low income settings, there's an increase in emotional stress, anxiety, depression, and PTSD, as you explained, when comparing to before and after the flood events or the disaster events in this case. In terms when the water access is not available, the contamination that comes with that, we experienced that. This was not a joke. And then, so how do then people that are living in flood zones, in shacks, um, then it happens as a traumatic stresses for the community because they live in this area. I'll make an example.
Mm.
Here, the government took the people that were living in that particular space where it was flooded to another space. But it's not the same for a person who's been living in a seven-room house to live in one-room house with their entire kids and other people with it. It takes something out of you, Dr. Mabena, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, completely. And I think you are bringing in the angle of how do we as human beings, from an individual basis, but also as a community basis, how do we actually prepare
Yeah.
for disasters?
Mm.
Because we are a very reactive society,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
we
We
are.
wait for things to happen before we pick up the pieces. And
Mm,
we forget that we actually have the intelligence, the autonomy, the resources. We've got so many things that can help us prepare better.
mm,
I'm just thinking, and obviously it doesn't really apply to floods. You can't really stop, Mother Nature from bringing down the
Yeah,
rain.
shame.
But if you're talking about informal settlements, for instance,
Mm,
if we are investing enough in educating people who live within those circumstances about fire hazards,
mm,
fire safety, how
right.
to make fire safe, how to prepare food safely, how to keep water not contaminated. If you teach them those skills and they live by those skills, that already becomes a leg of emergency preparedness,
Mm,
right? Because it's a preventative thing, if I can
mm,
put it that way.
mm,
Then you bring in other layers of, okay, so if a fire does start in one shack, let's play out the scenario. What can we do so that we can contain that fire to that one shack and it doesn't spread? Okay, if it spreads to a group of shacks, what can we do so that it doesn't? The problem is because we are reactive, and when trauma strikes, we are in panic mode, we get paralyzed,
yeah.
nobody does anything, freeze, and then the fire catches the whole informal settlement.
Mm,
Whereas we could have put in measures to to if it at least happened, let it stop here. If it happened, let it not go even further and further and further. The
mm,
same with the floods, right? Like I say, we can't stop the rain from coming, but we could do some education, educating people and communities of where to build and how to build.
mm. Yeah, yeah, that is so true. But see,
So
yeah,
yeah,
it's
there's many
mm,
things that we could do, but I think the conversations have to start shifting to emergency preparedness and
mm,
not only us talking about these stories after the disasters have happened and
yeah,
looking at the bad consequences because now people are feeling helpless. People are going towards the alcohol, which is also a mental health condition
yeah.
in itself, substance abuse.
Mm,
People are turning to that because we have not taught people the skills of dealing with their own traumas
mm,
so that they don't self-sabotage even more.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm afraid, Dr. Mabene, because we are a nation that loves laughing and creating humor on really, really important conversations. Instead of tackling the conversation, we just make it a joke and move right along. It's something that scares me a bit more these days as I'm growing older because I mean we need to talk and we need to create that I mean give the next generation something to work on. But we are busy just laughing about stuff that are really important for our society. Is that also part of the PTSD of some sort?
You know, um, in Setswana, there's a saying that says, "Leso legolo ke ditshego." Like the biggest death of us as human beings is laughter because we
Mm,
just laugh at
mm,
everything.
yeah,
It's not a bad thing. I mean, sometimes what can you do? Instead of crying, laughing is probably a better option. It's a
yeah.
more stimulating option. But I think we also have a responsibility to take those jokes and all of that people make content out of that everybody's actually listening to and laughing about,
Mm,
and let the serious talkers give a little bit more context about those very topics and flood them also in social media in the same way so that
yeah.
people can start not just laughing about the issues, which is funny and nice and whatever, but also start learning practical things and important things that we are not making opportunity to talk. I think people who have the ability and the wisdom to convey these messages have not been doing justice, to be honest. We haven't been speaking up. We've been
That's
laughing
okay.
along as well and not talking,
Yeah,
not teaching
that is
people what they
absolutely
want.
true. That is absolutely true. Now, Dr. Mabena, yo, this one is touches very. How does shame, stigma, or lack of recognition hinder someone from saying, I really need help? And just a person would come through and say, knock, knock, I need help, especially in communities where mental health normally is not something that is openly discussed. Kuvele, people will just make it go normal. It's, oh no, we know her mother was like this, or it's like something that is should be commonalized for a lack of a better word.
You know, one of our biggest diseases as human beings, second after the ego, is shame.
Right.
Is shame. And it's because we've become so judgmental as human beings. We judge everything. We judge the weather, we judge the color of your hair, we judge everything.
Mm,
And the judgment is what builds stigma.
mm,
If people only ever hear bad things about mental illness, and from a historic point of view, even our traditions, even our cultures, mental illness is a witchcraft kind of thing.
yeah.
If you hear bad narratives around something, you're obviously going to judge it yourself too, right? It's going
Mm,
to be a bad thing because that's all you hear about that thing.
yeah.
Are you openly going to want to associate with something that you feel is bad?
Mm,
No, it's shame.
mm,
Shame. If we stopped caring so much about what the next person thinks about how I am, who I am, and whatever, that is how we are going to stop stigma. But unfortunately, because we live in community, we live in relation, everything is in comparison with everything. People's opinions always matter, unfortunately,
mm,
to us. So I think then it becomes important for us to start changing the narrative
mm,
of seeing mental health as a negative thing
mm,
and start seeing mental health as something that affects everybody, including me. We said 1 in 4 adults
mm,
suffer from depression. That means me,
mm,
right? So if I can accept and openly talk about me having a mental illness,
mm,
I make it safe for Portia to
mm.
also accept and speak openly and say, me too. And I'm really struggling with it. I am very suicidal. I don't have hope. I don't know what to do.
Mm.
We don't talk because we are too scared to be judged.
Yeah, we do. Absolutely, we do. What strategies then, or mediums, or cultural practices that you have seen that are helping people process and heal, especially on the settings where there's really limited resources?
Mm. That's such an important question. I was having a conversation with somebody who is actually a traditional healer in
Okay.
the Eastern Cape, in the Umtata area. And we were having exactly this conversation about what role can culture and tradition and traditional healers and all of that start playing in responding to disasters, in supporting people with mental illnesses, and even other illnesses for that matter, because what we have done is we've relegated all responsibilities when it comes to disasters, to mental health, to trauma, to government.
Mhm.
It must be government who must provide this. It must be
Yeah,
government who must, the clinics, the social work, it must be government who shelter. But we forget that we as a community have community resources. We've got healers, we've got traditional healers in our settings
yeah.
who can open up spaces for these safe spaces where people can start having open conversations
Okay.
about mental illnesses, the consequences that the mental illnesses have on themselves and on their family members, to start destigmatizing the conversation about mental health.
Right.
And start moving away from seeing mental health as a witchcraft kind of conversation, but as a public health issue, a social issue that everybody has a role to play in. It's including indigenous knowledge systems and practices, such as using traditional healers and their methods as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, feminist and healing practices centered and community informed approaches, how do these respond to mental health and in the wake of disasters? I'm trying to think of in my neighborhood of that it was women who were assisting the families that had challenges during those floods. Were
It's
men
always the
and
women.
there
It's
were
always the
females. See, I'm going to use my language. They were wearing boots, the mud boots that our parents used to wear, and they were out there digging bodies, busy doing stuff that you really think, is a woman supposed to be doing this? But here they were, women. So take us through, Doctor. You're an expert in this. Honestly, what happened to our society?
A lot of things happen to our society, and most of them are rooted in capitalism and patriarchy. Those things, that's another conversation completely, but
Yeah,
you brought in the feminist question, so it has to start somewhere, right? And I
right.
think what capitalism and patriarchy and all of that have done to us as society, it has separated us.
Mm,
It has pitted us against each other. You know, now we are fighting for these rights. The lesbians are more important than the gays, are more important than the sex workers, are more important than the children, than the people with disability. Capitalism has broken us as human beings into bits and pieces and
mm,
forgot that we are one whole,
mm, mm,
which is what feminist principles bring us back to community, communal ways of doing things for the greater good of one, of all, right? So I'm not surprised that it's the women who always wear the boots. It's the women who run into the burning houses. It's the women who are taking off their tops and protesting in the streets because it's feminist principles. It's how femininity functions.
mm,
Femininity is about togetherness. It doesn't break us into different parts like capitalism and patriarchy tries to do. So I think if we could just, and again, sometimes when we speak about these terms, some people want to be alienated because now they're like, the feminists have started
mm.
bashing men and patriarchy
Yeah.
and whatever. It's not about that. It's not about being a man or being a woman. It's about the systems that were built around patriarchy, which is about money,
Mm,
competition, superiority,
right.
power, all of that. The principles of feminism are about collective healing, collective living, collective enrichment, collective power, collective everything. Let's help each other. It's not a all for themselves kind of a situation.
Right.
So if we can go back to the principles, leave the language out if the language makes us fight. Let's go back to the principle. And they are African principles.
Mm,
They are principles on Ubuntu.
yeah.
If we can just go back to the principles of who we are as human beings and how we coexist as human beings, then we are going to be able to also raise men and boys who live like us as females, who will run into the fire like us, who will run in the street when they see injustice like us, who will, do you know what I mean? So we also have to raise the boys in
Mm,
the way that we are supposed to live and do things. We can't say one thing and do another.
and
It
do
has to be
another.
aligned.
Yeah, yeah, right. That's it, Dr. Mabena. Because of the time, we have to wrap up. But looking across your work, what is the key message that you'd like to leave for the audience, for the followers, especially people in the affected communities? Because right now, Durban has been announced and pronounced as a flood prone city. So if it rains, you have to be careful and you have to, and many other areas in the entire country. Somewhere else it's actually droughts. Some other areas, there are different disasters that we're facing. What would you give people to carry with them as we go through these disasters?
So we hear a lot about self-care. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of key messages that I would want to leave, but I think it's important to remind everybody concerned that trauma is not only just the big things, as we spoke about, there are little things that constantly cause all of us trauma every day. So even in responding to trauma, we shouldn't only just look at the big things like the structural things and the food, but we also have to look at the little things, the things that we are seeming or deeming as the little things. We have to really do that. And mental illness is something that really affects all of us, one way or another. And the best thing that we can do for each other is to
Mm,
accept each other and support each other by linking each other to
mm,
whatever services that will be helpful to us. Instead of judging me, link me to a social worker at least, or link me to a traditional healer who I can talk to, or somebody. I
mm,
think that's the key message, that it affects all of us, all of us. No one is unscathed. And the best way to help ourselves is to really just accept each other and link each other to services for help.
This is absolutely true. And because yes, we are still here, Dr. Mabena, do you see a shift of how communities are beginning to talk about mental health, mhlambe in small circles where you work?
Yeah, they always is, and social media helps a lot, right? Sometimes in a positive, sometimes not in such a positive way. But I
Mm,
think the visibility of the effects of mental illness, the most extreme being dying by suicide,
mm,
it is so much in our faces at the moment as society, that it's forcing some conversations to happen in certain spaces. You are hearing people now talk about mental health and suicide risks and whatever to their children and whatever in churches, where
mm,
you would never hear issues of mental health be spoken about. The
mm,
gogos, when they are going to collect their pension money, we used, in some of our programs, we used to have what we used to call GBV ambassadors in communities, used to just educate communities about gender-based violence, mental health, psychosocial support, care, all of these things. And they would tell us stories about how, the grannies at their pay points, they would
mm.
be talking about mental illness. They would be talking about substance abuse and their grandchildren who are stealing their things and whatever. So I think the way things are playing out and are happening so, in our faces, it's forcing people to have conversations. Are the
Right.
conversations enough? Absolutely not, because our conversations are still stuck on the problem. We
Yeah.
have not started having conversations that are solution focused.
Mm.
So yeah.
We do need those solutions. Please come back again, Dr. Mabena, to give us some of that so we could see how we really can deal with the stresses, with the traumas, and their childhood traumas as well, Dr. Mabena.
Absolutely.
There are so many of these, but these ones,
Intergenerational traumas, there are
yes.
just so many. There's just so much, so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but the disaster traumas are really taking up the flag because these things just happen randomly.
yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you so
And
much.
unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, but unfortunately, it's also a mirror of the relationship that we as human beings have with nature. That's
Mm,
why the frequency of these disasters are so much more, because we have lost our relationship with nature.
mm, mm,
And yeah, if we just restabilize that relationship again,
mm.
I think we'll be good. The storms will
Yeah.
calm down.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mabena. I am so excited for this. And I can't wait. I can't wait to have another session with you where we're covering more on this topic because it's very important. We're not going to end here. We definitely are going to have much more. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. And thank you for making the experience so nice. I really appreciate it.